So my name is Dennis Speed, and on behalf of the Schiller Institute, I want to welcome everyone today to our conference, Inaugurating the New Paradigm, Advancing the Dialogue of Civilizations. You could also refer to today's proceedings as the poetic principle in politics and art. It's sort of a two-day Congress that we're holding. We're having a conference today and a concert tomorrow in Brooklyn. And these events are embedded, this dialogue is embedded in that process that's happening in the United States, the presidential transition. The poet Percy Shelley, in the conclusion of his A Defense of Poetry, asserted that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Today, we seek and require that poetry, the poetic principle, be acknowledged as the necessary basis for statecraft and for a dialogue of civilizations. Now, the Schiller Institute was created as an attempt to introduce that principle into East-West relations back in 1983. But there was not really a vision in the US government at that time for such a thing to occur. So Helga LaRouche, on her own, created and initiated that vision. This higher cultural idea was the actual basis, however, of what today you know as the World Land Bridge or the New Silk Road or many other forms of proposals, which are often referred to as economic proposals or political proposals. But they are really policies for a new world cultural platform and a higher conception of economics that would flow from that higher cultural conception. The General Welfare Clause of the American Constitution is completely compatible with the principle of win-win cooperation that underlies the ideas of the New Silk Road and One Belt, One Road, the ideas, for example, that President Xi Jinping of China has been discussing. But that we need a cultural Silk Road as well. For the last 20 years, Helga has been known as the Silk Road Lady because of the work that she did in China and in her speaking particularly at a conference that happened at that time back in Beijing in June of 1996. Now more than ever, her contribution and the contribution that we made with respect to this idea of a dialogue of civilizations will be the necessary basis for this new cultural paradigm. And so it's always my honor to introduce the founder of the Schiller Institute, Helga LaRouche.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to greet you in this way via video and hang out. But before I speak about this subject, which Dennis mentioned, the dialogue of cultures, since we are living in so extremely traumatic times, let me spend a couple of minutes to situate the need for such a dialogue of cultures in the strategic situation. Now, I think given the fact that you are in New York and in the United States, I don't have to tell you that the situation around the incoming new president can only be described as absolutely hysterical. I have never seen anything in my lifetime that you have a new elected president who actually will come into the White House in all likelihood in 6 days, but the hysteria of the mainstream neoliberal media and a large part of the political establishment on both sides of the Atlantic is not calming down. It seems that they still do not accept that there will be a new president. Now, this has everything to do with the fact that this is not an inner American incident alone, but the absolute surprising election for most people, surprising election of Donald Trump is actually part of a global process which is underway and which is not going to stop until the reasons for this process which you can actually call a global revolution until the causes are removed. Now, if you remember, the Soviet Union only collapsed a quarter of a century ago. That is not a very long time in terms of real history. And at that time, Fukuyama actually said, this is the end of history. Now the Western liberal democracy model has proven to be victorious over communism. In the future, there will be no longer a fight between ideas. The future will be characterized only by economic and technical problems, and therefore it will be relatively boring. Now, he was obviously absolutely wrong, because this period of history, which I would say started with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and which led to what we call globalization, is coming to an end, or has come to an end already. Now, obviously, that process, which really started immediately with the broken promises of the United States and others not to expand NATO to the Russian border, which subsequently was broken many times, and the recent deployment of US and NATO troops and military equipment to the Russian borders is just the latest example of that. So that started practically immediately following the disintegration of the Soviet Union. But the real escalation of the financial dimension of this globalization occurred with the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1999, leading to the absolute unrestricted speculation, which then led subsequently to the crash of 2008, and which has brought the world now to the verge of another such crash, but just much bigger and more dangerous. So what has happened now in the recent period is that the people who were the victims of these changes, where the billionaires became more rich, the poor became more poorer, and the middle class increasingly vanished in many countries, there has been a revolt against that, because the people who have come to the conclusion that with this system of globalization, they would not have a future, they started to revolt. And the first massive demonstration of this revolt was the Brexit, the exit of Great Britain from the EU in June last year. And the next major manifestation of that was the vote for Trump, where especially the people in the American Rust Belt and other areas where people felt that they have no future with this system, voted against the tradition of Bush, Cheney, Obama, and what they saw with Hillary as a clear continuation of that policy. Now, then next, a couple of weeks later, the no to the referendum in Italy against the EU bureaucracy was an expression of the same process. And it will continue because this year, 2017, there will be many elections in Europe where you will see the same kind of dynamic in process. Now, the transatlantic establishment was completely shocked, first about the Brexit, then about the Trump victory. And it was very clear that from day one, they did not accept that. It was quite amazing to see that, they expressed shock, they expressed dismay, they used the unbelievable language against the elected president of the United States. And so they did not accept it, but they also didn't want to look at the reasons why this election result had occurred. So they decided to replace the truth with a new narrative, and the new narrative being that Russia stole the election by hacking the DNC, by hacking Podesta. And naturally, what they didn't want to people reminded anymore is that, if anybody stole the election, then it was the DNC stealing the election from Bernie Sanders, but that sort of was pushed under the carpet, and instead you had the absolute accusations that Russia hacked the election process, that it was Russia favoring Trump, and therefore Russia really stole the election, which is quite an admission all by itself and quite ludicrous, but that is what they decided to go with. So naturally, there was never any evidence presented for that. And then already parallel to the Russian hacking story as such, a British agent of MI6, formerly MI6 British intelligence, Christopher Steele, started to put together a 35-page report with unbelievable allegations against Trump. I do not even want to give it the honor to repeat it here. Totally ludicrous. Again, no evidence. And this report was available to all the media already in the election period in September, October. It was given to the FBI, but nobody touched it because it was so clear to everybody that there was absolutely no evidence to it. So then, basically, eventually, the same paper was given by McCain to the FBI again, and only after Trump had basically said that he believed Julian Assange of Wikipedia more than the US intelligence services, all hell broke loose. And the three intelligence chiefs, Clapper, Brennan, and Comey, first briefed the US Senate, then President Obama, and then finally Trump, basically with the so-called evidence of this Russian hacking. And they made a summary of the 35 pages of this report by Christopher Steele, a summary of 2 pages, and added that into the material they gave to Trump. And that particular act gave this completely ridiculous report the integrity of being part of the official intelligence. And then that triggered CNN to publish it. Then the internet firm BuzzFeed also, and then all the media, and the whole thing broke out wide in the open. And this occurred exactly on the evening before the first press conference by Donald Trump. This is an unbelievable story, and even French official intelligence people, like a person called Eric Denisset, who is an official of French intelligence, says, well, it is simply that the American establishment fears that with the new administration comes in a big clean out, and they will lose their privileges and economic benefits. So therefore they oppose it, but there is absolutely no evidence for it. Now, I think there is a deeper level to this whole thing. And that is the fact that what Donald Trump is threatening is that unipolar world which the neocons and the neoliberals have been building since the collapse of the Soviet Union, which went along with regime change, color revolution, wars based on lies against all countries who would not submit to the idea of an unipolar world run by the British and the American government. Now, Trump, as you know, has promised he would remedy the relationship with Russia. And despite some tensions, there are also signs that he may actually find a quite good cooperation with China, especially when he wants to realize the $1 trillion investment in rebuilding the American infrastructure. He already received offers from China to cooperate. He had an excellent discussion with the CEO of Alibaba, a large e-commerce firm of China. He met with Jack Ma, and they agreed to invest together in another $1 trillion investment. So the signs are actually quite good. So naturally, if if the United States would cooperate with Russia and have a decent relationship with China, then naturally the entire game plan to have this unipolar world, or call it globalization, which is just another word for Anglo-American financial empire, would go out of the window. So that is why they are trying to undo this election of Donald Trump. And you can see very clearly it is a direct intervention by the British. So therefore, it's not a question of party against party, or it's not a question of nation against nation. It is the old dying paradigm of the British Empire, if you equal that with globalization, clearly reacting to the emergence of the new paradigm. Now that new paradigm, however, is already very strong, and it is, moving very, very rapidly. Now, China has initiated this new paradigm with the new Silk Road policy. It has offered a win-win cooperation to all countries who want to cooperate. Already more than 70 nations are engaged with China in huge infrastructure projects of scientific cooperation, the most advanced technologies, space cooperation, and other such things. It's already 12 times the size of the Marshall Plan of the post-war period. And every day, new exciting breakthroughs are being reported. Like on Tuesday of this past week, the first railway between Djibouti and Addis Abeba started to function. This is a rail line of 750 kilometers. It is now clear that China has engaged in making a feasibility study of the Lake Chad project Transaqua, which is the idea to save Lake Chad, where the water has now shrunk to 10% of its previous levels, and it's endangering the life of about 40 million people living in the Chad Basin. To undo that, reverse that, fill up the Lake Chad with water coming from the Congo River area by using about 3 to 4% of the unused water which goes into the ocean in the Atlantic, but not taking it from the mouth of the Congo, but taking it from the tributaries of the Congo River, and that we're using gravity of the 500-meter difference in height to refill the Lake Chad. This will affect the life of 12 nations. It will improve, it will give a navigable waterway, it will give hydropower, it will create large amounts of land for irrigation and agriculture. So it is a fantastic development. And similarly, news are coming that the Kra Canal, which will shorten the traffic between the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, which will be one of the absolute hubs for 3 billion people in Southeast Asia and South Asia, is also now on the agenda to be built. These are all projects we have been fighting for 20, 30, 40 years. So all of this is extremely positive and good. Now, together with this ridiculous Fukuyama story about the end of history, 25 years ago, you had Samuel Huntington basically predicting that, with the collapse of the communist system, however, you would still have a clash of civilizations, because he claimed that the axioms of the different religions and civilizations would be so different that there never could be unity and harmony for the human race. And he wrote an absolutely absurd book called Clash of Civilization. Now, that is equally wrong as Fukuyama was wrong, because with the win-win economic cooperation of the new Silk Road, you have the possibility of having a dialogue of cultures on the highest level, exactly what the Schiller Institute is promoting with conferences like this. The basic idea is that if all the people would just know the most beautiful expressions of the high phases of the other culture, they would love the other culture because they would feel so much enriched and recognize that it is actually a beauty that we have many cultures. It would be very boring if only one civilization would be there, and especially the Western liberal one is not exactly attractive. And therefore, if you look at the Confucian tradition in China, Mencius, the literati painting, or you look at the Vedic writings or the Gupta Sanskrit drama tradition in India, the Indian Renaissance of Tagore, Sri Aurobindo, or you look at the Italian Renaissance, you look at the German classical period in music, in literature, especially in music from Bach, Beethoven to Brahms. These are contributions to universal history, which once every nation knows the best expressions of the other one, I'm absolutely certain that all conflicts will absolutely disappear, and we will have a rich universal culture consisting out of many national expressions and traditions, but still being united by universal principles of art and science. Now, the other dimension which must come to this dialogue of cultures or dialogue of civilizations is a look into the future, not only back to the best traditions, but a look into where should mankind be in 100 years, in 1,000 years from now. And there it is very clear that the natural next phase of evolution is space, travel, research, cooperation, colonization of space. And if you think that in the long arc of evolution, life developed from the oceans with the help of photosynthesis to land. You had higher forms of species developing with higher forms of energy flux density in their metabolisms. Eventually, man arrived. Man started to move from the rivers and ocean sides with the help of infrastructure inward, land inward, and opened up the landlocked areas. And now we are at that point where the new Silk Road, becoming the world land bridge, is completing that phase of the evolution. So the natural next phase of the evolution is the development of nearby space in the first period, and then further space travel as we develop the technologies to do so with the help of fusion, energy, and similar technologies, that man will expand in space. And then we will no longer be just an earthbound species, but we will be a cosmopolitical species, if you want so. And that will then lead to a completely new knowledge about the identity of the human species. And we are in that period of a real epochal change, a new paradigm where I'm absolutely certain that mankind is about to become adult, and wars will absolutely be a question of the past. It will be, not worthy of the beautiful human species, which has so much creativity to still discover. And, we are just at the embryonic stage of mankind. So anyway, I just wanted to share these ideas with you because, if Trump sticks to his guns, if he can defeat this assault against him, and if you can help to bring the United States in the new paradigm, working with Russia, working with China, the future will be absolutely fantastic. So that is really what I wanted to tell you.
Thank you, Helga. The proposal, the new Silk Road becomes the World Land Bridge, it's been published by us in English, published by friends of ours in Chinese, and published with the assistance of various forces in Egypt in Arabic. So this exemplifies itself this dialogue and the process that we have already initiated. Helga has limitations in time, and what we're going to do now is we're going to entertain a couple of things. I think we have, first, if John Segerson is here, I'd like John to come to the microphone.
Hi, for those people who don't know me, hi Helga. I'm John Segerson, the music director of Schiller Institute. The hysteria around the Russian hacking reminds me most strongly of the situation in 1986 when two LaRouche activists won the primaries for lieutenant governor and secretary of state in the state of Illinois. That unleashed a furor where every single media outlet picked up a lie that it was Lyndon LaRouche and his associates who were responsible for the recent assassination of the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme. And it was truly incredible, the big lie that happened then. I just wanted to point that out. But to get to my main question, I was recently in Washington meeting with congressional staffers, and in the process of that, I think I figured out what the big roadblock in Congress is. I was in the remaining banter in the process of these meetings, I pointed out that I would be very interested in, can we get this microphone so that it doesn't keep. Thank you. I was pointing out that that it would be very nice to have found some kind of a chorus amongst the congressional staffers and maybe the congressmen and the senators themselves, because they really don't have anything like that. And in every single case, the staffer who I was talking with said, well, that sounds like a wonderful idea, but I can't sing. So I think that in the process of learning to sing, we might be able to make some real progress. But coming back to these meetings more seriously, what I was doing was briefing the staffers on the two events that we had here in Manhattan and in New Jersey, commemorating and giving condolence to the Russian people for the deaths of 92 people, including the large majority of the Alexandrov choir, the Alexandrov ensemble, who were on their way in a jet plane to Syria. For those people who don't know, that jet went down on Christmas Day, our Christmas Day. A number of days afterwards, the Schiller Institute participated in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Russian consulate here in Manhattan, and we sang in Russian the Russian national anthem. And this video went completely viral on Russian internet media, resulting in nearly 500,000 views and a flood of an outpouring of comments of Russians thanking us for showing that there are Americans who really don't believe in this crazy hysteria that's going on. And then later on January 7th, which happens to be the Russian Orthodox Christmas, in collaboration with many organizations, including most prominently the New York City Police Department, we held a wreath-laying ceremony at the famous teardrop monument, which had been contributed by the Russians to commemorate 9/11. And I pointed out to the congressmen and their staffers that what is really required in all of the things that we do right now, including Glass-Steagall, the adoption of Glass-Steagall, and other things, is that it's not so much a question of what we do, specifically the legislation that we pass, but what it is the intention behind what we do. And that the kinds of messages that, say, Valery Gergiev gave when he went to Palmyra to perform in a city in Syria, which had just been recently liberated from the ISIS terrorists. And these kinds of gestures are absolutely necessary in order to send a message to the Soviets, to the Russians, and to the Chinese that indeed there is an intention in the United States to collaborate, and that is actually what China and Russia are waiting for. And I would like you to comment on that and on giving any idea of other kinds of messages that the American population and the American Congress can send to China and Russia to give this sense that there's really going to be a change and that we can really do this. Thank you.
Well, there are obviously many things one can think of, but really, since you mentioned the 86 parallel, which is really absolutely to the point, I would like to answer the question in the following way. What Trump is now experiencing is really what I would call the LaRouche treatment. Because, my husband, who is very well known to many of you, he was a presidential candidate several times, and the way how he was treated by the United States, including his illegal and criminal incarceration by the Bush family, I still think that the fact that because of this criminal campaign against him, the American people have been deprived of the most beautiful and most important ideas expressed by any living Americans in our time. And the fact that the United States are today in such a terrible condition, with a shrinking life expectancy, with increased suicide rate, alcoholism, drug epidemics, all of this is the result that, because of this campaign committed by the Bush apparatus, the American people could not clearly look at these ideas and adopt them. And the United States would be quite a different place today if this would not have happened. Now, the difference is, in the case of LaRouche, the British Empire and their British puppets in the United States were able to carry it out, sort of clandestine, in the way of, how spooks operate with fake news. What you mentioned about the so-called Palme assassination was a classical case of a fake news, but many, many other fake news around LaRouche as well. I think that the best message to be sent, that there is a different America, would be that if this attack on Trump, which is now occurring not clandestine, but it is all out in the open, the British Empire is personally showing its hand. Christopher Steele, MI6, former British ambassadors are all openly speaking. So it is really the time to straighten out the history. America was made against that British Empire. The American Revolution was a revolution against that British Empire, but that British Empire has subverted the American establishment and convinced the elites to rule the world as an empire based on the Anglo-American special relationship. Now, the only way how people in the rest of the world will have confidence that the United States is again becoming a republic would go also together with the rehabilitation of Lyndon LaRouche, because I do not think that this injustice which was done to, in my view, and you permit me that I'm saying it because I'm his wife, but I'm saying it also, in the full estimate of his personality. If the rightful place of Lyndon LaRouche would be given by forces inside the United States, it would be the best message for China and for Russia, because it would prove that people are becoming serious.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to ask to come to the microphone now, Mr. Faiq Siddiqui. He's a member of a Pakistani think tank. Could you go to the microphone? And please just identify yourself to everybody when you speak, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, it's an honor, pleasure being part of this wonderful, beautiful event. My name is Faiq Siddiqui. I'm a host on a Pakistani TV channel, TV1, where we discuss political and social problems, whatever is happening around the world and whatever happening in America, whatever is happening with the American Muslims. These are our subjects. Avinat asked me to recite a poetry. All of us, most of us, not all of us, but most of us have an affinity towards poetry. And I believe that. And I will recite a poem here from Pakistan. This poet is from Pakistan. His name is Faiz Ahmad Faiz, and he was awarded in 1962 one of the most prestigious award at that time, Lenin Peace Award. Lenin Peace Award. And he was a very genius, dignified man, and so many people, he has so many fans, and he's greatly admired in India, Pakistan, and all over in South Asia. His name was Faiz Ahmad Faiz. The concept behind this poem is this, that poet is a young man. He's in love with a girl, and he's praising all the time about her beauty. But all of a sudden, one day, he thinks, and he gets so sincere about that what the calamities are taking place in the world, where people are hungry, where people are in blood, and where people are dying. And he start thinking, he devote his thinking, instead of loving her, he now is thinking more about how to help those needy people. And this is the main concept of this poem, that he is in love, and then all of a sudden he moves his thinking and how he expresses himself. He goes like this. Oh my love, don't ask me for the love I once gave you, oh my love. I thought that life will shine eternally one me only if I had you. Spring become long lasting in the world only because of your face. Except your eyes, nothing is there in this world to see. Except your eyes, nothing is there in this world to see. If I found you, my fate would bow before me. This was not how I wished to happen. Oh my love, don't ask me for the love I once gave you. Not only grief of love, the world is full of sorrows, heartache. There's happiness other than the joy of union, the dark magic of uncountable dark years, woven in satin, silk, and brocade. In every lane, body's flesh is sold in market, covered in dust, bathed in blood. Bodies retrieved from the furnace of diseases, pus discharge flowing from their rotten ulcer. What can I do? Sometime my eyes look in that direction also. Even now, your beauty is magical, tantalizing, but what can we do? Even now, your beauty is magical, tantalizing, but what can be done? Not only grief of love, the world is full of the sorrows, heartache. This is happiness. There is happiness other than the joy of union. Oh, my love, don't ask me for the love I once gave you. This was his poetry. And this man was a very sweet and humble man. His message was this, that in this world, we should treat everyone with justice, and justice should be for all of us. I thank you very much.
Helga, how are you doing on time? I just want to make sure we don't stretch you out too much.
Well, I can take one more question if somebody wants to have one.
Okay. If there's a question, just go to the microphone. Okay, here's a question. The person's coming up now.
Helga, this is Rick from Bergen County, New Jersey. On the webcast last night, some people brought up the issue of, in the Hamiltonian program, not simply considering this to be an infrastructure issue, but rather a platform. So raising the level of the discussion from simply talking about, for example, fixing the 35,000 bridges that engineers claim are structurally deficient in the United States, but rather putting the whole thing into a broader concept. And formerly we had the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and one of the principles was the projects that would be embarked upon would carry the means of repaying the credit that was issued in order to finance those projects. It seems to me a lot of people have trouble understanding that concept. In your experience with the New Silk Road, have they set things up? Do you see that financing mechanism being successful, and that the investments are bringing back a return in the form of additional taxes or other forms of revenues, and the fact that new businesses will be set up along the Silk Road? Have you experienced that? Can you say anything about that?
Well, I mean, obviously, infrastructure investment is not bringing returns back in the same year of 25% as Josef Ackermann of Deutsche Bank had demanded a couple of years ago. But, infrastructure investments are long-term and sometimes take years and decades before they show the immediate return. However, given the fact that the AIIB and the New Development Bank only started really to operate last year, it is really too early. What one can see very clearly is that these projects are being built with an unbelievable speed. I mentioned the Djibouti-Addis Abeba rail line. There are many rail lines, fast rail lines. China wants to have alone in China until the year 2020, that is less than 4 years from now, 50,000 kilometer fast speed connecting all the major cities of China. And the New Silk Road is really the offer to take this Chinese model of economic development and give it to every country which wants to cooperate. So, if the United States would decide, to go in the same direction, and Trump has, promised he would invest $1 trillion, you could have a fast train system in the United States connecting all major cities, in a couple of years from now. Using the best technologies, maglev and other systems. And you would see that the role of infrastructure is not that it is profitable as such, but that it creates the environment for middle-level industry, for basically productive firms to prosper. I think that the most important thing for the United States right now is a serious effort to increase the productivity of the labor force, because you have almost 100 million people who are unemployed but do not even show up in the statistics because they have given up the hope to ever join the labor force again. Then you have these unbelievable figures of increasing illiteracy, functional illiteracy. You have drug addiction, you have suicide as the result of either drug addiction, alcoholism, depression because of a hopelessness for the future. And that has to be addressed with a real serious education program, a CCC program for the youth. And I think that the biggest challenge is really there, because even if one assumes, which I do, that Trump has the best intentions to do that, I think that there are probably many people in his team who still are of the old school of money makes money, profit is something to be had, Wall Street type measures. And the American system of the economy as compared to the British system really goes back to the idea of Hamilton and Carey and such economists who have made very clear that the only source of wealth is the increase in the productivity of the labor force caused by an increase of the creativity of the individual human being. And that requires a lot. The whole education system must be changed. You have to throw out algorithms, you have to throw out mathematics, you have to go back to basic scientific discovery, you have to go to a classical culture. And I think that that is so absolutely important, why the Schiller Institute must really be a guiding force in this process, because the popular culture in the United States is so detrimental to the idea of creativity that I think we have to really intervene in this situation in a very, very powerful way, because I think that it can be done. I think Trump probably will go about it very energetically. I think he's a good businessman. I think he will have the right connections with forces internationally. If I take this meeting with Jack Ma as an example, but it takes a lot more to get the population back to the kind of scientific, rigorous thinking as you have seen it the last time in the United States, really in the Kennedy period with the Apollo program, and before that with Franklin D. Roosevelt. And in between you have 50 years where things went absolutely in the wrong direction. And that is a huge and gigantic job. It requires a national mobilization and international cooperation to turn this around.
Okay, thank you.
So Helga, as I said, I know that you've got to get going, and I want to thank you for being able to address us today. We're going to continue here, and one of the things we'll do in just a moment is go to the requested poetic transition that we'll make. So I just think everybody should join me in thanking Helga for being with us for this section. Okay, so we're going to cue now all right. The Schiller Institute had a board member, a member of its board, who's now no longer with us. His name was William Warfield. And in order to, if we will, clear the palette for the presentation that you'll be hearing from my friend and the important scholar, Ben Wang. He doesn't like to be referred to that way, but I refer to him that way anyway. We're going to play something Helga and John and I talked about This is a presentation that Bill Warfield gave of 3 poems. And they basically discuss, as you'll hear, in effect, the present state of American culture, and they suggest a solution. The poems are written by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Dunbar was an African-American poet born in 1872 who died in 1906. He was a close friend and associate of Frederick Douglass and some others, and had a famous intervention that he made in 1892 at the Columbia Expedition at the time of the 400th anniversary of the discovery of America by Columbus, which he and Will Marion Cook, the violinist, and Frederick Douglass did at that exposition to assert, by means of poetry, the dignity and the character of humanity as expressed in the African-American fact and factor. But in this particular instance, you'll hear, and the poems make themselves clear, it's a slightly, it's an old tape, so you have to try to listen rather carefully, but I think you'll be able to pick up why we wanted to interpolate this here. So we can roll.
Maybe all of you do not know that Paul Laurence Dunbar, not only did he write poetry having to do with the Southern dialect, but he, being a Midwesterner, he also wrote some with Midwestern accent, and of course, some poetry with no accent at all. And we, in this presentation, are going to do one of each of those. This first one is called Deacon Jones' Grievance. I've been watching them, Parson, and I'm sorry for to say that my mind is not contented with the loose and careless way that the young folks treat the music. Tain't the proper sort of choir, and I don't believe in Christians are singing hymns for hire. But I never would have murmured, and the matter might have gone if it wasn't for the antics I've seen him carry on. So I thought it was my duty to come to ask you if you wouldn't sort of gently take them singing folks to task. First, the music they've been singing will disgrace us mighty soon. It's a cross between an opera and an old cotillion tune, with its dashes and its quavers and its highfalutin song. Why, it sets my head a swimming when I'm coming down the aisle. Now, it might be almost decent if it wasn't for the way that they get up there and sing it. Hum, dum, diddle, loud and gay. Why, it shames the name of sacred in its brazen wordiness. And they've even got old Hundred in a bold, newfangled dress. You'll excuse me, Parson, if I seem a little sore, but I've sung the songs of Israel for 80 years and more, and it sort of hurts my feelings for to see them put away for these harum-scarum ditties that is capturing the day. There's another happening, and I'll mention it while I'm here, just to show that my objections all is offered sounding clear. It was one day they were singing and was doing well enough, singing good as people could sing, such an awful mess of stuff, when the choir gave a holler and the organ gave a groan, and they left one weak voiced fella singing there all alone. But he stuck right to the music, though it was trying as could be. And when I tried to help him, well, the whole church scowled at me. They say that's so low singing. Well, I pray the Lord that I growed up when folks were willing to sing hymns so high. Why, we never had such dues in the good old Bethel days, when the folks was all contented with the simple songs of praise. Now, I may have spoke too open, but it was hard to keep still. And I hope you tell them singers that I bear them no ill will, and that all might get the glory is my wish and my desire. But they'll need some extra training before they join the heavenly choir. Prometheus stole from heaven the sacred fire and swept to earth with it o'er land and sea. He lit the vestal flames of poesy, content for this to brave celestial ire. Wroth were the gods with eternal hate, pursued the fearless one who ravished heaven, that earth might hold and feed the perfect heaven, to lift men's souls above their low estate. But judge you now when poets wield their pen. Think not well, the wrong has been repaired. 'Twas all in vain that ill Prometheus fared. The fire has been returned to heaven again. We have no singers like the ones whose note gave challenge to the noblest warbler's song. We have no voice so mellow, sweet, and strong as that which broke from Shelley's golden throat. The measure of our songs is our desires. We tinkle where old poets used to storm. We lack their substance, though we keep their form. We strum our banjo strings and call them lyres. I might say, as a personal thing, this particular one is one that I remember from a young boy hearing every Sunday that we had a musical. We always had somebody who was considered one of the ladies of the church who was really into elocution. And this one I remember hearing along with Lies, Lies. Remember that one? Some of you know that one. Along when I was no more than about 12 years old. Go away and quit that noise, Miss Lucy. Put that music book away. What's the use to keep on trying if you practice till you're great? You can't start no notes a flying like the ones that rants and rings from the kitchen to the big wood when Melinda sings. You ain't got the natural organs for to make the sound come right. You ain't got the turns and twists for to make it sweet and light. Tell you one thing now, Miss Lucy, and I'm telling you for true. When it comes to red rock singing, it ain't no easy thing to do. Easy enough for folks to holler looking at the lines and dots when there ain't no one can sense it and the tune comes in spots. But for real melodious music that just strikes your heart and pains, just you stand and listen with me when Melinda sings. Ain't you never heard Melinda, bless your soul, take up the cross? Look there, honey, ain't you joking, honey? Well, you don't know what you lost. You ought to hear that gal a-wobbling, robbing, box, and all them things. Hush their mouths and hide their faces when Melinda sings. Fiddling man just stops his fiddle, lays his fiddle on the shelf. Mockingbird quit trying to whistle because he's just so ashamed himself. Folks are playing on the banjo, drop their fingers on the string. Bless your soul, forgets to move them when Melinda sings. She just spreads her mouth and hollers, come to Jesus. Till you hear sinners trembling, steps and voices timid like a drawing near. Then she turns to Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Simply to the cross she clings. And you find your tears are dropping when Melinda sings. Who that says that humble praises with the master never count? Hush your mouth. I hear that music as it rises up and mounts, floating on the hills and valley, way above this burying sod, as it makes its way to glory to the very gates of God. Oh, it's sweeter than the music of an educated band. And it's dearer than the battle songs of triumph in the land. And it seems holier than evening when the solemn church bells ring, as I sit and calmly listen while Melinda sings. Towser, stop that barking. Hear me? Man, they make that child keep still. Don't you hear the echoes calling from the valley to the hill? Let me listen. I can hear it through the brush of angels' wings, soft and sweet, sweet, Lord, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. As Melindy sings.
We'll be doing a concert tomorrow, and what we'll be producing there, this will be in Brooklyn, and you can find out about it at the table. One portion of that concert will be a presentation of a song cycle written by Roland Hayes, the African-American tenor, and it's called The Life of Christ, a cantata for voice and piano. And we're going to be presenting that. It'll be a little bit different in the way in which it will be done. Normally it's done for a single voice, but we are having three singers, Reggie Bucknight, Frank Mathis, and Everett Suttle. It'll be narrated by Elvira Green, and they will be accompanied by Gregory Hopkins. Several of the individuals, particularly Elvira and Gregory, were working with us and participated in several concerts with Mr. Warfield. Of course, Warfield was one of the most famous singers in America during the period of the 40s and the 50s. And I cite this because at a certain point, particularly in the 50s, he became an ambassador for the State Department, deployed in various ways throughout the world to represent the best of American culture. During World War II, he had been an intelligence officer because he was fluent in French and German and one other language as well as English. And when there was a need to debrief the German troops that had been captured, it was found that that was very difficult to do, except for Bill Warfield, because Bill Warfield would sit down at the piano and he would play and sing various German leaders and get them singing as well. And very soon, anything that you wanted to know, they would tell him. And that sort of is the same point, I think, that, as you know, we're making throughout, that poets are the unacknowledged power. And poetry is the true basis of dialogue. And in one sense, it's even the most important element of strategy. Ben Wang is many things. He's an award-winning published writer, translator, author of multiple books on Chinese classical literature, primarily poetry, senior lecturer in languages and humanities at China Institute, many other things. He's lectured everywhere, teaches at the United Nations, you name it. But the most important thing about this gentleman that I think is important is his love for what he does. And I'm not going to say more about it because I think you're going to see him express that. And we'll be able, I think, to see in the next, the actual topic, let me just say, as I use it, is the soul of an ancient culture, classical poetry and literary painting of China. This is something he's going to be lecturing on in the next subsequent weeks, and people can find out other information about that at the table. So, Ben?
I just want to warn you, you might just well be disappointed. I love Dennis, but he does not, when it comes to me, he does not always tell the truth. Before I start, I would like to thank Mr. Dennis Speed of the Schiller Institute, and my friend, I call her my baby because she's the age of my granddaughter, Miss Lin Yan of the Foundation for the Revival of Classical World Culture, for letting me come to speak with you. Now, I'm going to veer away from realism. One of my favorite writers and poets and playwrights, the America's great Tennessee Williams, through Blanche Dubois, one of the greatest characterizations by Williams, she says, I don't want realism, I want magic. But of course, our life is inseparable from realism, but I try to veer away. So today, I'm going to talk about the poetic lines written almost exactly 1,300 years ago. I was counting while I was sitting there. In Chinese language, in Chinese culture, we have a saying. We say, keep reviewing, keep going over the old, and the new will come to you. And one of my favorite writers of the 20th century, Muriel Spark, she says famously, in the prime of Miss Jim Brodie, she writes, she says, the glory of the past is the inspiration for the future. So even though I'm talking about a dead poet's lines, but I feel they last forever. As in the Chinese, to the Chinese literary critics, every good Chinese, classical Chinese poem, every line might have 18 layers of underlying images. So as I'm getting older, the 4 lines in total that I'm going to introduce were the lines that I studied when I was 8, 9 years old. And now I'm 80, and I'm still talking about it because over the years, I dug up many underlying images when I couldn't understand when I was small. So whenever I would, in fact, I warned Dennis when I came in. Dennis told me, he said, you have 40 minutes to talk whatever you want to talk. Inside, I didn't say anything because I'm a guest. But inside, I was saying, 40 minutes only? I mean, these 4 lines would take me 4 hours to do it. And then I looked at the ladies and gentlemen, and I'm not trying to kiss you up. I really meant it. I looked at you and I sized you up and I figured you out. And I said, these guys could stay with me for at least 4 hours for these 4 lines. Well, of course, I'm not going to do that because I promised. So don't be scared. This one is old, but still my hearing is good. I can hear murmuring. People say, oh my God, I'm going to stay for 4 hours for his talks. Because I already promised Dennis that I would behave myself. Well, at China Institute, at other places, I warned them first. I said, once you get me started, I want to tell you something very personal. I was 18 months old. I could not say anything but only one word. Mama, mama. Everything is mama. I wanted to eat mama. I want to do other things, mama. So my father finally, of course, he was not very happy. So I was the only son. They waited a long time. So he asked my mom, is it possible that our child is mute? My mom said, I don't think so, because at least he can manage mama, you know. And then my mom said to me, once you open your mouth, you never stopped. So in other words, I'm a fool. Fools hate silence. Once you get me talk, I cannot shut my mouth. But I'll try. That's all I can promise you. Actually, I kind of lied to Dennis. I was thinking at least 50 minutes. I think 10 minutes more, you will bear with me. This is one thing about being, you know, as old as I am. Because when you're old, you can act a little crazy. People sympathize with you, and they forgive you, and they might even love you, warts and all. And so because of the time constriction and the limit, so I would like to read about the poet whose works I'm going to introduce. It's on the screen. The first page, please. And his name is Li Bai. And this is an excerpted version of what I have written of a book, which is to be published soon. It's at my publishers. Li Bai of China's great Tang Dynasty, most famous for its poetry, is the most celebrated poet of the period and in Chinese literature, earning the reverent sobriquet of Celestial of Poetry from the Chinese readers and scholars over the centuries. Li Bai's distinction lies in that he brings a special eloquence and bravura to his poetic works with an exceptionally notable flow and grandeur during an era when lack of them would be an exception. Li Bai's poetry on the whole is vivacious, hopeful, and philosophical in outlook. This special transporting quality that is featured in all his works appears to grow out of this outlook that he held regarding life and art. His pursuit of spiritual freedom and beauty in life, his divine communion with nature, as well as his keen sensitivity to the Chinese language, that is a unique blending of music and picture, in that spoken Chinese is singing and written Chinese is writing. So because of this, I would like to think the Chinese language is eminently suited for poetry, for its concision. All these elements join forces to contribute in establishing him as a poet, peerless among his peers, a master of all masters. So usually I don't read notes, but because of the time, please bear with me. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the two selected lines. During the Tang Dynasty, two poetic forms flourished: pentasyllabic poems and heptasyllabic poems. Pentasyllabic poems and heptasyllabic poems, because the Chinese language is a monosyllabic language in that every character has only one syllable. So when I say pentasyllabic, that means 5 characters per line. When I say heptasyllabic poem, that means 7 characters per line. Either they are quatrains or regulated verse, which means 2 quatrains put together, 8 lines in total. And they are always even number, even though the number of each line is odd number. But the total number of a poem must be even number. So they balanced out. So to the Chinese, everything must be balanced because of this yin and yang union, perfect union between yin and yang. Besides, in way back in the ancient times, Chinese poetry, I'm talking about between 1100 and 500 BC, all the poems as they are printed out in the Book of Songs, translated, hello, can you hear me? Translated by the great Arthur Waley. Those poems were written in 4 characters per line, quatrosyllabic. But then quickly, during the Han Dynasty, which was about 200 BC, the Chinese started the pentasyllabic poems. And because adding 1 character to the quatrosyllabic poems, the Chinese found there's more music or musicality to it, as we're doing boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Sounds much better than boom, 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 boom. So a student over the years has suggested, he says to me, he said, teacher, actually, classical Chinese, when you're reading it, it's rap. I said, you're right. I think rap comes from China. So after a few hundred years, the boom, 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 boom. The Chinese said, some scholars, poets, they said, why don't we make it 7 characters? Then it's boom, 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 boom. There's more of a move, more of a rhythm. So pentasyllabic quickly developed into heptasyllabic poems. And during the Tang Dynasty, these 2 poetic genres in pentasyllabic form and heptasyllabic form, poetry flourished. So the first one, I'm so sorry, I forgot. Thank you so much. You see, I just said she's my grandbaby. So the first one, without further ado, I would like to, you see the time? See, and I am known for my low ability. When I say low, meaning actually it's high, but lowly in quality, low talent in digressing. So don't let me do that. We have to study these two couplets. They are selected from 2 poems. One is from Tune of Clarity and Serenity. And this poem is written in the style of ballad. I'm sure you all know, ballad is a song. I mean, poetry is inseparable from songs. And this is written in the style of ballad. So the tonal scheme, there are 4 tones in the Chinese language. 2 of them are high and 2 of them are low. So when you're writing classical poetry, you must abide by the high, high, low, low, high. And the second line, low, low, high, high, low. So there's a perfect balance. So the high tones are the masculine force tones. So there are set 2 characters that should logically belong in the masculine force-dominated universe, whereas the low tones should ideally set to characters, pictures that should logically belong in the feminine force-dominated universe. So the tonal scheme is very strict. But in the style of ballad, the tonal scheme is not that rigorous. So the first two lines, this is from a poem written in the style of ballad. So the tonal scheme is not that rigorously composed. Before I go on, I must emphasize one important fact, which is it seems that the Chinese writer, composer, especially poet, they seem to be quite impossible to be separated from nature. Everything is metaphor, metaphor, metaphor. A petal falls, that means the poet is getting old. The golden halcyon days is going. So if there's a drizzle, that means a little vicissitudes or little ache of the heart. So it's always like this. That's why when I saw the movie Il Postino, yeah, the movie, when I heard the word, they said metaphor, and I said metaphor. Yes, Chinese poetry is all about metaphor, because to the Chinese, to come right out to talk about I, you, me, I'm suffering, it is just so vulgar. So everything is borrowed. So flower, fleecy of cloud, a piece of cloud floating, and everything is connected with human life, with human existence. So with this in mind, we'll study, we'll look at this. The first line. First, let me read the two lines. See if you without understanding a thing, see if you feel anything about it. 云想衣裳花想容，春风拂槛露华浓. Only 14 syllables because it's a heptasyllabic couplet. So the first character is cloud. Now, every Chinese character is a picture. In other words, there is no Chinese character, not one character that is not a picture of nature. We put them together. And so they seemingly, at first glance, the Chinese language is totally visceral. But when it gets to the poetic level, then the visceral joins forces with the cerebral. Then beauty and poetry happen. So the first character, Yun, is cloud. The top, do you see the dots and the window panes? That's rain coming down. If rain is coming down and you see clouds are hovering, dark clouds. So the first character is a picture in which the top part is the rain, the bottom part is the cloud. And the second character, Xiang, is heart. The bottom is the radical, meaning the root of the character, which is the heart. Now, the Chinese heart is the mind, because in the ancient time, there are two things the Chinese didn't know the truth of them. One is when human beings emote, it is our mind that is working. But the Chinese thought it was the heart, because when you are about to cry, you feel a little squeeze of the muscles here near the heart, near the area of the heart, but you don't get a headache. So the Chinese didn't know, and we feel the palpitating of the heart, the beating of the heart. The the head, the brain inside is still, it doesn't move or move. If it starts to move, you know you're about to die or something. So the Chinese always go one step below. So what to the Western people is the mind, to the Chinese is the heart. So we go one step below. So the English word, in English, the word heartbreak, guess what it is in Chinese? Literally translated, it would be intestine broken. You said that sounds disgusting. But hello, think about it. How is the body part heart different from intestine? They are all body parts. You know, we feel like my guts are rending, are breaking. Here, guts is close to the intestines. So when we hear intestine broken, we feel, oh, so poetic. But to that literally translated, you said, this is disgusting. I fail to see any beauty in this poem. What is this intestine? So we always translate intestine broken into heartbroken. But actually, it's not correct. But then, no translation is the real thing. As the famous Roy Campbell, a very great man of letters at the fin de siècle of the 20th century and the early part of the century, he was from Australia. He was a poet and a writer and also a philosopher. Roy Campbell, I'm not sure if you know. He says something about translation. And no offense to all the ladies here, and I see many, okay, not at all, no offense, I hope. He says, translations, like wives, are never faithful if they are in the least attractive. And I even though it doesn't sound very respectful to women, but I tend to agree with him. I'm so sorry. I know I'm totally, socially wrong, politically wrong, I'm totally politically wrong. But I didn't say it, okay? Roy Campbell said it. So the translation is never ever the same. So the second character has the heart on the bottom. Unfortunately, this is not a class. I don't have a whiteboard or blackboard to show you the evolution of this picture, how it started out, a real heart-looking character form, and then it went through linear changes throughout the centuries until it finally got to look how it looks, the second character of the first line from the left. The bottom is heart. So whenever you see that, that means the character has something to do with the mind or the heart. Are you quite with me? Yeah. So, but I have a Q&A session, Dennis said. So you really need to speak only 40 minutes because we have a Q&A session. And I said, okay, yes, sir. Yeah, I hear. So the second character, heart radical, and the top component, I cannot get into details because of the time. The top component means have a relationship between two, either two people or one person, one inanimate object. So anyway, it means to think about something, to miss something, to yearn something, to wish for something, or romantically yearning, or I think about you, or just simply without emotions, I think it's going to rain, that kind of think. So one picture can have 1,000 meanings. So this is really the case of the Chinese language. So this xiang, but I had to put down one English word underneath to give you an idea. So I put down yearn, Y-E-A-R-N, but it can be think, wish, want, lot of English words. So the clouds, first character, cloud or clouds, and then think or wish or yearn for. And then the third character you see the top dot in the old days is the head of a person, and then it's his shoulder, and then his robes. So it's not difficult for you to imagine the aesthetic sense for the Chinese people. And we feel that clothes have to be large. Clothes have to be loose in order to be good looking. I think it has something to do with the way the ancient Chinese people were, because of the diet system. So most Asian people, Chinese people namely, were very thin and skinny, and because of the diet. And so they like to wear, especially if they're important people, they like to wear very loose clothes in order to look bigger and more important. Does that make any sense? So that third character is robe. Okay, clothes, dress, any clothes. So to dress, that's why I am against. I always wear larger clothes because I'm small and thin, and I'm midget. You know, I'm so small, and so I like to wear. But my sister convinced me, forced me to get this jacket. So I said, I don't like it. I said, it's so tight. You know, I don't feel. She said, just shut up and buy it. You know, because you're out of date. Your clothes, your wardrobe. You know, you look so old-fashioned. So I was forced to put. And today I said to myself, you know, I'm going to put this on. You know, so just to be more fashionable, less old, and so the third character is dress or clothes. And the third character, do you see this character clothes appears on the bottom of this character? Do you see it? The fourth. So it means robe, dress and robe, 衣裳. 衣裳 put together, it's a general word for most like apparel in general. In clothes, dresses, including the robes, the robe or the cape that you wear. That gives a like flowing effect. And then the next fifth character is blossom, flower. And the sound is hua. Please look at me. Hua. Look at my mouth. Hua. I know I'm so short, so now I'm on my toes. Hua. Because the ancient Chinese saw a grass. It's just a grass. All of a sudden, spring comes, warm weather comes, and it blooms at the tip and opens up. So the sound is hua. You see how visceral the language is? And the picture, the top is the radical, which is grass. In the old days, it's grass. And the bottom is transformation, chemical or transformation or chemistry. So the ancient Chinese didn't know what happened. All of a sudden, warm weather comes, this grass opens up chemically, transforms into a flower, the tip of the grass. So it's grass radical, the bottom is transformed. The grass has transformed itself into a blossom. Are you with me? So the sound, and also very rarely do we see flowers open up this way, usually that way. Do you agree? Of course they are in the world, but the ancient Chinese didn't see. The most of the blossoms they saw, they open up like that. So the tone, the sound, the tone is hua. So it's high tone. Can you do it? You're good. So you come to study Chinese with me. Yes. So you see, and then the second character is repeated, which is actually a poetic taboo to have two same characters to appear in the same line. I mean, it doesn't take great imagination to understand this point. So here, too, if you use a verb, by the way, this is a verb. If you use a verb in the same sentence repeatedly, it's very boring. I like you, I like your brother, I like your sister. You just get so bored. You know, change, I'm fond of him. Or I love your mom. Or I adore your father. You change a word. Instead, I like your father, I like your mother, I like. So it's a poet, particularly when you are composing a poem, it's almost a taboo, a major faux pas to have two same character be so close to each other. So obviously, the poet is doing this intentionally to emphasize this yearn for. And the last character is face, the classical Chinese character for face. So put together, cloud, yearn for, dress and robe, and blossoms, yearn for the face. At this point, I must tell you a little bit about the background, historical background of this poem, of the composition of the poem, including these two lines. During the Tang Dynasty, poetry flourished, as I mentioned before. So Li Bai was summoned by the emperor illumination. This is my loose translation, emperor illumination. He was considered one of the towering emperors during in the history of Chinese literature. So on a spring day, during the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese created the peonies, and peonies became a very fashionable and trendy flower. Everybody liked peonies, and they come in different colors. So in early spring, the second or the third lunar month of the calendar, which is around late April, so the peonies were in full bloom. And the emperor said to the head eunuch, he said, "Get Li Bai over here," because he was a like resident poet in the palace. So, which was a rare honor. But what did Li Bai do with this honor? He abused it. In what way? He drank all day long. One of his favorite things. Guess what the other thing is? Beauty. Beauty in nature and beauty in a person, namely a woman. So he idled away his days in his indulgence in these two, wine and women. So he had no time to compose poetry for the empress. He couldn't care less. He says, "I didn't want to come. You call me. You sent for me. I didn't send for you." So the emperor would ask about him. So asking him to compose poems, he said, no, I'm busy, having fun, enjoying la joie de vivre. So he's summoned to the palace, and the emperor's favorite concubine, imperial consort, I should say, who caused the downfall of the great Tang Dynasty. She was a true femme fatale, one of the greatest femme fatales in the history of China. Beautiful beyond description. So on this spring day, peonies were in full bloom, and she was particularly lovely. So at twilight time, so the emperor sent the eunuch to fetch Li Bai. So Li Bai was stone drunk already on fine wine, of course, in the palace. So he said, "Don't bother me," he said to the head eunuch. And he said, "Tell the emperor, I'm busy." The eunuch said, "Busy doing what?" He said, "Getting drunk. Do you mind? I like my wine." So he said, I can't go back to the emperor. He'll kill me. He'll order the execution of me. So he said, please do me a favor. I beg of you. So he said, "Oh, what a pest." So calling me, beckoning me and to summon me and getting me to the palace, and just for me to compose. I'm not a poetry composing machine, I have to compose when so he's mumbling his displeasure. So as he walked to the king and this imperial consort. They're in the imperial garden, appreciating the peonies blooming. And so when he got there, he was drunk. So he said to the chief eunuch, he said, "Take off my boots." So he just kind of laid down, and which was totally without etiquette. So ultimately, because of his behavior, wild behavior, in the end, the emperor nicely, kindly sent him home, saying that, okay, you're free, go do whatever you want, you know? So he was given a lot of money, and then he left. He stayed in the palace for about 5 years. And at the end, he said, 5 years too much, too long. He didn't want to stay. So he looked at it, he saw, because he's very, of course, he's extremely sensitive to beauty and the peonies and the spring night and the spring moonlight, the moon is rising, and this gorgeous imperial consort, she's there, sitting there, the emperor and her, they're drinking. So he takes one look, of course, he's impressed. So the emperor said, Li Bai says, "What do you want me to compose, Your Majesty?" The emperor said, "Compose a poem in praise of the beauty of my beloved." So he said, okay, is the paper and the inkstone and the ink patty prepared? So the emperor said, long prepared. So everything was presented to him. So it took him a second, and he came up with this one line. And before I go on, there are two topics, in my opinion, in my very humble opinion, as a translator, as a writer, two most challenging and difficult topics to write about, even to talk about. That is beauty. One is beauty. Beauty of a person particularly. What do you talk about? Long lashes, beautiful, the color of the eyes, and the fair, the fine skin, and also the beautiful body. I mean, we all know that. Why is it challenging? Because we know beauty. We have seen beauty, everyone, especially a person of my age. I've seen beautiful people all my life, like Dennis. I think he's really handsome. So poets are particularly, what's the other difficult topic to write about or to talk about? Love. Again, because we have all experienced that. So in order to write about beauty of a person or about nature, or to write about love between two people, you have to be a genius, like Mozart. Mozart is for children or for geniuses. So says Alicia de la Rocha. So says Wang. So I think these two are the most difficult topics. So Li Bai, being Li Bai, the greatest poet in the history of Chinese literature, he sat down for a few minutes, not few minutes, few seconds. He took one look at the backdrop and the beauty and the scent and the beauty of the blossoms and the beauty of this imperial consort, almost without missing a beat. He came up with this line. So I learned this line in school when I was in my teens. But the first time I saw it, read it, I was about 8 or 9. So teachers taught us to interpret this line as, when you see the fleecy of clouds, the fleeting of clouds, you think of her robes. When you see blooming, flowering blossoms, you think of her face. Which is beautiful enough. And that is the interpretation to almost all teachers and students in China. But as I have lived for so long, more and more I feel that is not the only thing. Because in the Chinese language, as I said, human beings, to talk about human life is a little low and very vulgar. So here, the cloud is functioning, can be interpreted grammatically as being the subject of the line, which means as the clouds are flying by and they look down, what do they see? Her robes. And the clouds are so yearning for her clothes. Why can't we be more like your clothes? So even heavenly objects are envious of her. And when the peonies are blooming, is the subject, Hua, that they yearn to look more like her. Why can't we look more like you? As beautiful people, human beings may think we are, but look at that face. So the blossoms yearn for her face as clouds are yearning for her robes. And I think it's just to describe a beauty, and that line, and the imperial consort start to laugh so happily. Wouldn't you, ladies here? Not only when we see clouds, we think of her robes. When we watch a blooming flower, we think of her face. But the clouds and flowers, they are envious of her. I would say there is only one Western counterpart, that is Salome, as how she is described by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde wrote Salome in French. Then he himself translated it into English. But then, of course, you all know. And how did he describe Salome's beauty? Salome, you know Salome from the Bible. And Oscar says, Salome, she looks like a white rose, as how it is reflected in a silver plate in the moonlight. And I think that it can be the Western counterpart to this. 云想衣裳花想容. This is her face. And the second line, the first character, spring. And the second line starts with the first character, spring. Second character, wind, breeze. Fu is caress, float by. Kan is doorsill. Lu is dew. Hua is the essence of dew. To the Chinese is the Chinese equivalent to the essence of perfume. Nong is rich. And the nong, the last character of the second line, is water and farming. Water to farming, it means rich. So the first line is about her apparel, her clothes, and her face. And the second line is about her movement. When she moves, it's springtime. The spring breeze is caressing the doorsill, blowing. And the scent, fragrance, it's her scent. So both lines. So the face and apparel robes, not enough. The second line is her movement and her scent. The scent that she emanates, this imperial consort. Do you see the beauty of this woman? And everything is metaphor. Nothing is real. in order to translate this poem, I cannot put I always say to my students, to my friends, to my audience, I would say classical Chinese poetry deserves annotation, but not translation. You need to explain. Otherwise, you just look at the facial, by the face that, of course, there is surface luster, but ultimately you need a helping hand to guide you word by word, character by character, to know the quintessence of the beauty. That's why I decided to do what I did, for you to imagine. So the translation is in a very unique or bizarre way. Actually, I did not translate. All I did was I just put almost the equivalents of those characters like that, just for you to get an idea. But I think once you have heard me talk, I hope it gives you something. And my God, time is almost up, so I have to hurry it up. Now, the second couplet that I chose to talk is from a poem called Parrot Isle. The word passing is what I added. This Parrot Isle is known for its beauty, natural beauty. There are a lot of beautiful parrots in the beautiful blossoms and plant life in the spring in particular. And because I'm sure it's because it's so beautiful, it can last forever. Nothing that beautiful can last forever. Gobble didn't last forever. So the Parrot Isle in the 14th century, it sank, the isle. It's like Atlantis. So now it's a myth, almost a myth. Although once it was there, it was called Parrot Isle, 鹦鹉洲. During the Tang Dynasty, it was there. So obviously, Li Bai was not only a poet, a great poet, a wine lover, and aesthete, but also he was a great traveler. He loves to travel. So, of course, he traveled on the Yangtze River. This isle was in the Yangtze River, the southern river. In China, there are two rivers. In the north, the Yellow River. In the south, there is this Yangtze River. This isle is in the Yangtze River. He passed by this isle many times, and he was in different seasons. So one spring he passed by, he thought, he took in, as he was taking in the sight, he was so impressed. So he composed a poem. And these two lines, I would say, are this couplet is the highlight of the poem. And this is Li Bai's description of the beauty of Mother Nature. The first two lines is the beauty of a mortal, a human. But this is the second couplet that I chose, is a description of Mother Nature. So even though the isle has sunk, but these two lines, as long as there is Chinese language, these two lines will prevail. The first character is smoke, mist, or fog. Obviously, it's springtime, the spring, the warm weather, and it's mixed with the cold weather, early spring. Yan Kai, the mist is split is opening, dispersing. Third character is orchid. Now, forgive me for not teaching you the etymology, the beautiful etymology, because of the time. Third character is orchid. And the fourth character, you might have thought would be that orchid would be followed by blossom, because that third character is only referring to the species of that flower. Doesn't mean the opening flowering blossom. So usually it's lan followed by hua. By the way, what is hua? Good. But surprisingly, Li Bai being Li Bai, he would not be so common or so regular. So he has to do something different. So the lan orchid leaves, the leaves of an orchid, meaning he is giving the reader, he is providing some mystery, literary, poetic mystery. He doesn't tell you the flowers. He saves it. Let's see what he does. So the mist, the fog is lifting, and the fog does not open up anything, but the fog is so dense, sure looks like it's splitting the orchid leaves. But the fact is that when the fog, when the mist is touching the leaves, that automatically the fog opens up. But here, this second character, kai, can be a transitive verb. That means to open up, to disperse. So the abstract is doing something to the something of substance, of the real object, which is orchid leaves. And that is already the magic versus realism. The first 40 characters. Fifth character is fragrant. Now, this character, I will teach you the etymology. There are two components. The top component is grain. Rice or wheat or sorghum, any grain. Does it look a little bit like a plant, like a tree? The top of the fifth character, xiang. The sound is X-I-A-N-G, and the translation is fragrant. Look at that Chinese character. The top is grain. The bottom is the sun. The sun, the grain is basking in the sun. And when the farmer, ancient Chinese farmer, walking past the rice field or wheat field, and he smells, and the grain is growing. And what does he smell? Fragrance. Not Chanel No. 9. To ancient Chinese, fragrance is when the grain is in the sun. So that is the Chinese character for fragrant or fragrance. And the sixth character is wind, as we studied before. Feng is wind. And the last character is warm. So the first line reads, the mist or the fog has opened up, and you see the orchid leaves. And the fragrant breeze is so warm. Of course, it is spring day. It's on a spring day. But it doesn't say the orchid blossoms are fragrant, although orchid blossoms are very fragrant. It has a special intoxicating fragrance. And the second line, this poem is not written in the style of ballad. It's written in the style of a pentasyllabic regulated verse. So the tonal scheme is extremely important. But I wish I had more time so I can talk in detail about the tonal scheme. But put it very simply, the two lines must be arranged like this. The part of speech of the parallel characters must be, ideally, they must be the opposite, the antithetical. But if they are parallel, it's okay too. But at least they have to be related, whether it's antithetic or parallel. But the tones of the matching characters must be the opposite, meaning the first line, say, is BBAA, BBA. Second line must be AABB, AAB. So high, high, low, low, high, high, low, matched by low, low, high, high, low, low, high. So both in picture and in song, in music, it's the yin and yang, the two forces are perfect. Then life is perfect. There is this perfect balance between the two forces. So the first character is a noun, and it's abstract. It's not some object that you can, not tangible. It's intangible. It's mist. Yan, and smoke goes up. So the sound is first tone, high tone. Yan. Kai is open. So we have high tone and high tone. So we have yan, kai. And then you have the lan, orchid is again high. But the first and the third character, there is exception to the rule. They can be the same as the first character and the third character of the second line. It's allowed. Otherwise, it's too difficult to compose a poem. Because a poem, this art form, is very, very contrived, man-made, after a lot of thinking and arrangement. But ultimately, the lines must look very natural. So that is art. So the first character of the second line is nothing intangible. It's tangible because it means riverbank. So one is smoke, one is riverbank, which is soil, basically. It's earth, versus mist, which is abstract and intangible. And the second character, what's amazing is Kai is open. The second character of the first line is open. And the picture is a door. And then you see the bolt on the door. You remove the bolt and the door can be open. So it's open. And the second character of the second line is what? Putting two things underneath your arms and press between the flesh very closely, tightly, so it doesn't fall down. So one is open, one is pressed against each other. Do you see the two verbs being so different? So in the first line, the second character is kai, and the second character of the second line is jia. It's low. So the yang and yin, masculine force, is matched by a character of feminine force. Anjia. What does it mean that riverbanks are pressing against each other? Because let's study the following, then I explain. And the third character of the second line is peach, which is the match of orchid of the third character of the first line. Are you with me so far? Because this is the highest literary genre in Chinese, in classical Chinese, in Chinese. So to explain to this, it takes a little concentration, and I hope I made myself very clear. Is it so far? Is it clear? Oh, good. I'm so glad. So the third character is peach. Just generic word for peach tree doesn't necessarily mean peach blossom at all. But the fourth character is hua, is flower blossom, peach blossom. So the match of orchid leaf is peach blossom. Do you see that? So peach blossom would emanate a most intoxicating fragrance, much richer, much more intoxicating than the subtle fragrance of orchid blossom. So the peach blossoms are blooming. How do we know it's blooming? The following character, the fifth character tells you. Fifth character is a colorful brocade. Okay, brocade is made of silk. It's gold or something beautiful already. But this character is brocade, but colorful and with multicolors. So, and what's the sixth character? Sixth character is waves. Because if you have river banks, obviously they're by the river, and on the river, what is it? Water. The waves are moving, but the waves are in brocade color, even more gorgeous, more multicolored. So, which is, of course, the reflections of the peach blossoms. Are you with me? So you don't even know what is that smell, that which smells so good. So first he says, that's why in the first line, he only introduces the orchid leaves, because in early spring, orchid does not open up until late summer or sometime, most of the time, early autumn. So actually, it is the peach blossoms that are in full blossom, which turn the waves into something like even more colorful and gorgeous brocade. And the waves are generated. They are flowing. Why? Because when the water sees the flowers being so beautiful and so fragrant, they come out to see what's going on, and thus waves are created. So that's the second line, and that's the beauty of Mother Nature. So the two lines, so the last character of the first line is warm, and the second character is be born, birth, or generate. So nothing can be born from coldness. As T.S. Eliot wisely pointed out in The Wasteland, the first line, April is the cruelest month, because the dead soil, earth, the life of plants, they're trying to struggle out of the earth, soil that is beginning to get a little warmer. So it is with warmth that something grows. So this is the line. And the fragrant wind in the first line is matched beautifully by the brocade-like waves. Do you see the matching game? And the sound goes like this. 烟开兰叶，香风暖，暗架桃花，锦浪生. So do you see the first one is 暖, and the second line ends with 生, and which is usually how a Tang Dynasty poem will end, however wistful and sad the poem might be, but the tone will always at the end save the day. The last character of the tone of the last character must always be either rising or high to save the day. And now, I read it one more time. 烟开兰叶，香风暖，暗架桃花，锦浪生. So that's how it goes. And one great painter, Li Bai, had to wait almost more than 700 years for one of the greatest painter to emerge, and also a great poet. And also the next picture, please. Thank you, thank you. I forgot to thank you. Thank you. And Li Bai had to wait for almost 700 years for another great master in poetry, calligraphy, and painting in all. And together, when the three genres were all matured, they come to a beautiful union, and it becomes another cultural genre, only limited, strictly limited to Chinese culture, which is called the 文人画, literati painting, literati painting. And about this painter, quickly I read about this Shi Tao, that's his name. He's also a calligrapher and painter. He's from 1642 to 1707. You see, almost 700 years after Li Bai. So by that time, by the time Shi Tao emerged, the Parrot Isle had long gone, had long sunk into the Yangtze River. But from these two poetic lines, because Shi Tao loved as, well, the only similarity between me and the unworthy me, and this great Shi Tao is our mutual love love of Li Bai. But then almost all Chinese people love Li Bai. Social phenomena and political phenomena can have their day, but culture and poetry, they last forever. And so if you come across a Chinese friend who say he or she doesn't even know Li Bai, you quickly wave them goodbye. Okay, never to see them again. About this Shi Tao, one of the towering artists of literati painting, which is a unique genre blending poetry, calligraphy, and painting. Shi Tao was a descendant of the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty. A great admirer of Li Bai, Shi Tao fashioned this work of art out of a couplet from a heptasyllabic regulated verse with 8 lines by the master poet, which glows in its poetic splendor as it is ablaze with color and spirit, which has exerted tremendous influence on later artists of the genre. So if you see this painting, which is beautifully designed, this is his imagined Parrot Isle, because by the time he was born, the isle had long gone. But from the poet, he gathered from his imagination. I think human imagination can do a lot. And this is beautiful, not only the color. Now, colors rarely appear in classical Chinese paintings. The Chinese people believe ink can open up to 10 shades of colors. We don't need color. But in this case, he must, because the two poetic lines, they are ablaze with colors. So he painted this, and he saved the other side is the Blue Mountain, and on the other side, the top right, these are the 2 lines in a special calligraphic style, and which is called clerical calligraphic style, usually practiced to put down official governmental documents in ancient times. Shi Tao, he was good at all 4 major calligraphic styles. So if I were the painter, I would definitely set this painting into a free and with bravura spirit style, which is called running or cursive style, but not our great master. He deliberately, he put down clerical style to match this, because he is saying there is this poetic merit. And the cursive style calligraphy or running calligraphic style will only belittle these two great lines. And also the way he executed this clerical style, his clerical style is not dry or pedantic. They come to life, beautiful. So those are the two lines. And someone asked me about the colophon and the smaller characters. It says, this is from Li Bai's poem, Parrot Isle. And then he signed his own literary sobriquet. Now, this is a very short talk, but I really hope, the prospect, in exactly 2 weeks, it will be Chinese New Year. And we call it Spring Festival because we feel it is the season which is functioning as a harbinger of the coming spring. And so we call it Spring Festival. So the prospect of the spring, the coming spring in this merciless cold season, we're anticipating in spring to come. So the prospect of spring and the talk of this eternal beauty of classical Chinese poetry is almost like a dual blessing, it's a dual blessing which can lift ourselves and which can give special distinction to our existence. And so if my little small talk, this brief talk, can enhance your interest in classical Chinese poetry or Chinese culture or poetry in general, however little there is, I will not have come in vain. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so we're opening up the floor at this point for any questions, any for Ben or for others. You forgot what? Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, but you sit here.
Be with me.
No, but sit down.
I sit down. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Denise. Right at the end of what you were explaining, this beautiful poem, the art came after the poetry. The poetry induced the beauty of the art. That is the idea, I think, at least the way I saw it. It really struck me out of the blue that this is exactly like Friedrich Schiller, the great German poet, who wrote the magnificent Ode to Joy. And only Beethoven had the chutzpah to actually take that beautiful poem and set it to music. And in setting it to music, he brought it even higher up, in the symphonic style. So I have to tell you, I have to thank you for, giving birth in my head for, your beautiful speech. Thank you.
Good. Diane, can you join us up here also? I'm gonna have Diane come up, that way any of the questions can be properly fielded. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Marcel, and I'm a high school English teacher. So that was absolutely spectacular, and I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Wang, for your presentation. One thing that I noticed, and it was, I think, very edifying because it seems like it sort of put the idea of certain elements of classical composition in a universal sense. And if it's no difficulty, I'd like maybe your insights and your feedback on this, because I noticed that when you were going over the poetry, first of all, you mentioned and you demonstrated the strict requirements, the stringent requirements. And I was thinking immediately of Shakespeare in his lines, like with his sonnets, the idea of iambic pentameter, the idea that you have the 3 distinct segments of the sonnet, they each serve a purpose, and they are unvarying, but at the same time, they are completely in harmony with the higher ideas that they are attempting to express and communicate via metaphor. And you mentioned the exact same thing about Li Bai in terms of the highest elements of poetry. Now, what I also thought was interesting was that you had him not, look at beauty or frame beauty, in a tired, poor, fashion that has been done before, but to elevate beauty in a metaphorical sense. For example, the idea that what was considered maybe the most powerful force in the universe, the idea of nature responding to something to show its intense beauty. And that's a new way, and I think in Shakespeare, if we look at universal response, he does the same thing, where he doesn't show necessarily just people responding to people, but he shows the actions of the lawful universe in his plays responding to people and cultures and civilizations, showing the power of a higher force. And also I was just thinking, in terms of iambic pentameter and in terms of what you mentioned with Li Bai, the way the language sounds, the way the language flows, the cadence is inimical to the rules of the language that are appreciated as higher beauty. So it seems like in so many different ways, we look at maybe Shakespeare as the height of, Western literature, and we look at Li Bai, as you mentioned, as the height of Chinese literature. And there are all these compositional similarities. And I was wondering if you see this as sort of a higher, just elevated principle of universal composition as a whole.
I always say that people say, I've been in this country for 52 years. Right after I came here, I've heard these words like inscrutable, the Chinese being, or Chinese east, 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 and west is west. But I always think that when it comes to beauty, art, and literature and poetry, we are brethren. There is no difference. Because after all, as Tennessee Williams pointed out, he said, what implements have we but words, music, pictures, scratches upon the caves of our solitude? And I think we all feel the same because we're all human beings. We turn on to these things. And the good things, like Li Bai's poem, like Shakespeare's sonnets, they don't go out of style, because this, of course, at first glance, you say, what is this? I don't understand a thing, But if you are taken by hand, word by word, character by character, and then you start to feel it, and the next time you read it on your own, you say, wow, this is really, you might come up with 3 more or 10 more, and more and more interpretations to it. So I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you sincerely, Mr. Bai.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Wang, sorry.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure, come on.
Hi, just a technical question. So on the high-low thing, do you have to choose a word, which is a high or low sound? And yeah, and just also on the previous comment, it also seems like the major and minor scale, sort of this idea of the masculine and feminine. Do you have any comments on? Okay.
Okay, good.
No, I think all human beings should be musicians.
Who doesn't like sugar? I guess there are people who don't like sugar. I guess there are people who don't like sugar, but they are definitely not my friends.
I was looking for Elvira. Is she here? Did she make it? Okay, fine. Go ahead, Patrick.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that presentation. And what I have to say is an impact on me. And I feel that I have lost out on a lot of life. Now, we are raised just like the food that we eat. The chickens are in cages. Everything is just kept in a box. And this is the first time I ever heard of what the writings and art really means. All I saw was, how could I learn how to write like that? And it had no meaning to me. Yeah, now it took all these years to understand the culture, which is magnificent. Thank you.
I'll just say, and again, if anybody else has a question, just come up to the front. But of course, that is the idea of the new cultural platform for people who, and Patrick said it very well, have found themselves, suddenly realized themselves have been deprived for years of an insight into whole sections of humanity. That's the whole point of what we mean by the World Land Bridge, or an idea of a new cultural platform. That's what we do with our chorus. I think people here know we are advocates of the idea that everyone can sing, because everyone can speak, that can speak, and that they're the same, they can be the same thing. But more importantly, and John is the co-author of a book called A Manual on Tuning and Registration, which talks about this idea of voice placement, and talks about the idea of intonation, and talks about the reasons that our culture has been deprived of that capability for some time. But what we do is we have a chorus which is based on proper tuning. It will be performing tomorrow. It will be opening up actually our concert tomorrow, which will be in Brooklyn, St. Joseph's Co-Cathedral. And the piano will also be tuned at that tuning of C at 256 cycles per second. And the reason we're doing these things is that we're trying to reintroduce classical principles of idea formation. Because in other words, what's really needed, and the issue of our, shall we say, crucial importance now at this time, is the ability to allow a citizenry to evolve, to develop, that is capable and is allowed to express what Shelley called profound and impassioned conceptions respecting man and nature. People will be inclined in the present circumstance to do it, but they don't have the tools to do it. But we know what those tools are. So we have an obligation in this situation, but we also have a capability. And music is the one that that I think that capability is most accessible, particularly for the American. What I'd like to do at this point is ask Diane, who is the co-director and the founder of the New York City Schiller Community Chorus, to say something. She was involved in an event that some of you know about from last week, and is in touch with some people here in the city, particularly in the New York Police Department and some other places, who are working with us on a project, sometimes just by tactically working with us. But we're working on a project to establish a 1,500-person chorus in the city. And this chorus is going to have a certain specialty in an area of the spirituals, African-American spirituals, but there are other forms of spirituals. And you'll see that tomorrow, both in terms of the chorus and in terms of the ensemble that performs the life of Christ, those of you who will be with us at the concert. But Diane, if you could say some things here at this point while people are thinking about what just happened to them.
Well, I think I'll maybe reference what Mrs. LaRouche said at the beginning of this discussion, because in 6 days, the United States will have a new presidency. And I think and it's very important. Mr. LaRouche talks about creativity, and what is creativity? And he distinguishes between creativity and innovation, right? Everyone, innovation, well, I can dye my hair pink and put things up my nose and whatever. But is that creative or is it destructive? And how do you define these questions? And Mr. LaRouche has very precise definitions of how you measure what is productive for society. But the emphasis is that it is something that you have not seen before or something that has not been known before. And I was reflecting, for example, on Alexander Hamilton, who was born in the Caribbean, who was witness to the horrors of the British, Dutch, slave trade, sugar trade, the brutality of it. And he comes to the United States, and we've not yet had a republic. Other geniuses like Cusa and Leibniz have had a conception of a republic. But Hamilton, working closely with George Washington, has an idea in mind of what, based on what the nature of mankind is, what a government should be. And I was thinking about, because this weekend we are celebrating the life and work of Martin Luther King. And if you think about what the United States was like throughout the time of his life, and you think about what his conception of the United States was, again, you see that this was a creative individual, because he had a conception of the way that the United States should be that had not yet existed. And similarly, you think about Kennedy with the space program, or I was reflecting on this poetry, and I don't know why, but this art reminded me of some of the pictures that you see when you look at the Earth from outer space, and you get a really universal sense of things. Because I was thinking of how astronauts, almost every person who's actually been in outer space, and they get there and they look at the planet and they have a completely different view of mankind and what the planet is and how small we are in the scope of the universe or the galaxy. So I would just here like to say that part of the purpose of great classical art is to enable us to have a quality of insight where we can conceive of a future which has not yet existed. And my fear that the United States, because we have been so broken, as Mrs. LaRouche described, and Dennis went through this very eloquently, I guess a week or two ago, when he was reflecting on his childhood and what he'd experienced. But you take someone today who is 19 years old, when they were 3 years old, W. Bush became president. And then when they were 12, I guess, or 11, Obama became president. I mean, what does this person know, or what is their reference point for what mankind should be, or how the human race could exist? We've been in perpetual war for that amount of time. So the challenge to each of us here today is to actually be able to think creatively about the potential, about what the existence of mankind actually should be, and the role that a sane United States can play in such an existence, and conduct ourselves in such a way that that occurs, and to not accept anything on a lower level.
So if there are no other questions, here's what we will do. Oh, wait, there's somebody. Go ahead.
There's a really fascinating cross-cultural implication to what you presented, which I'm sure you're aware of, but I think it's useful to point out to others, which is the way you discussed the question of thinking and longing as being the same word. The only other time I've heard this reference in that way is the way in the German language there's discussion, there's poems to Sehnsucht. That immediately comes to mind. And I must say, you punctured one of my bitter points, because I have very mixed reactions. There's actually a fight between Goethe and Schiller about what the Sehnsucht is, where Schiller has a much higher level idea about this being universal, while for Goethe, it's, you know, I'm suffering and nobody knows what I'm suffering. And he was very ticked off at Beethoven, who did these 4 variations, 4 settings of the poem, by the end of which you know what he's going through and you've already gone beyond it. So therefore it's like an insult to the poem, you know, sort of saying, let's leave that behind. But there are many puns and inferences in the poem, which is nonetheless, it's an important poem, even though Schiller goes beyond it. But there's one line in the poem which has over recent years gotten me more and more angry, which is when he says, "Es brennt mein Eingeweide," my intestines are burning. And it's always translated. Like I remember studying German, and the teacher just very dutifully said, "And this means I have heartache." And you always see the and then after years and years, I said, "What the heck is an Eingeweide?" And I looked it up, and it was the intestines. And when you were saying this just now, I couldn't help but just sort of laugh. Undoubtedly, the Germans probably got this from the Chinese. I'm just saying that. No, but it's a very, very interesting concept of longing, which in a certain sense is missing from the English language, but the fact that you find it in 2 cultures makes it that much more interesting.
Now, at least one person, namely my wife, has nominated that we would do our meeting next week from 12 to 2, because apparently, or was it 2 weeks from now, I guess, when you're doing your first, a week from now, yeah. She at least has put that into nomination. I suppose we'll get back to people about that, because Ben's going to be doing a lecture next week. And if you haven't seen that, you can get information about it at the table. What I'd like to say otherwise, because Mrs. LaRouche was insistent and correctly so, we would like you all to join the Schiller Institute. What's going to happen in the next weeks, nobody exactly knows, but we find ourselves increasingly the subject of reference, I'll put it like that, in many different ways and with various different countries and with people from various countries. And this is not said either to be mysterious or to brag or anything else, but we're in a time where it is possible for people to make an intellectual revolution for themselves and to experience things, as Patrick in one sense just expressed, that they've never experienced in their lives before. But there's another element. While initially you might find that the sense you have is one of having been deprived, there's another way to think about it, which is that you have access, particularly if you're in New York City, to every culture and most of the history of every culture of the world. It's all right here. And the question for us is, can we somehow create a form of Congress among ourselves in the city of all these different forms of culture, using in specific this concept of the poetic principle. And we talk about the notion of classical culture, but of course we don't mean a form when we say that. That's why we'd say that the African-American spiritual is part of that. We certainly think what you saw Bill Warfield do with his poetic recitations is part of that. This isn't a question of a form, it's a question of intent. And so in that regard, I would urge and request that everyone here join the Schiller Institute if you're not a member. You can see the various people at the table, my wife in particular, who's right there. I think you all have had no choice except to meet her as you came in. And so you should see us out there. And for further information on some of the things we'll be doing, just talk to our organizers. We're thinking, I think that what we'll do is just open up keep people can stay and have some discussion among themselves. We've got about another hour in the facility. So if you'd like to have some more discussion, please do that. Is there anything else that we need do here at the moment? I think I've said several things about the concert already, so people can just find out about that. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming and hope that you see how you can do the same thing, if you really work at it, that Helga and Ben Wang and John Segerson and Bill Warfield and Diane Sayre do. It's possible and necessary. So thank you for coming. Thank you.